So this training is about sharing our own stories in a way that allows us to share the work we're here to do and the insights we get, right? Those spiritual ahas and those sharing our own stories in a way. There we go. And sharing our stories in a way that allows us to express that deeper truth, right? And that to me is the heaven part of heaven on earth, right? Those insights that we get, like, oh, there's a new way to look at this. There's a new way to approach divorce, or there's a new way to approach autism, or there's a new way to approach supply chain management, right? Or there's a new approach to education in this arena that I see and I'm meant to be a part of. And all of our work on some level is a calling to be a messenger of humanity's new story, to be a mouthpiece for a new vision for our world. Now, that's the sort of big meta, like, oh yes, kind of thing, right? But if we talk about like heaven on earth or bridging spirituality and commerce, it's not just the heaven part, it's the earth part too. And that's where our personal stories really come into play, where sharing the grit of our humanity is what allows our right people, our tribes, to lean in, to trust us, to rely on us as a source of wisdom that isn't just filled with hot air and hyperbole, but also understands what it is to wrestle with these questions in an everyday, day in and day out sort of manner. And when we bridge those two things, when we have those amazing insights that inspire and have us look at the world in a new way, and we connect with people in a deeply human manner that shares the challenges we've gone through, the heartaches we've had, and makes them relevant to their journey, that's what allows us, them, our tribe, to go, they've been there, right? They aren't just filled with philosophy, they've been there. And if I need to go there, or I'm in the midst of going there, or I'm there right now, gosh, I want somebody who's been there before as well. I want to work with somebody that really understands what it is to, to wrestle with the questions I'm wrestling with in my life right now. And when we can do those two things, that's what allows your tribe to see you as somebody that has something new for them, that has a new perspective and a new path. And lately, as I've been working with people, I've come to realize that so much of what I'm looking for when I build brands with people and I build offers for my clients is I'm looking for the clients that are kind of at the end of their rope, right? Where they've tried all the standard stuff out there and they're looking for a guide to show a new way. And my friend, that I believe is what our calling is all about. So as we dive into today's training, marrying heaven and earth, this is really getting into the grit of humanity. This is the earth part. One other little story. Gosh, maybe 2012. 2012 was just a bitch of a year for me. In 2011, I'd met this guy that I thought was like my guy, right? Now I recognize like, oh, he was the fantasy that I was always in search of, even though I didn't know I was in search of a fantasy. Ever have that one? So that was him. And in January of 2012, January 2, we broke up. And then the following weekend, my business partner and I decided we were moving in different directions, both amicably. But, by the end of the first week of that year, my life had basically been stripped from me. The life that I knew, my love, my romance, my business partner, my business, my income stream, and little did I know, my identity as someone who had built a successful business, all been stripped away. And I was lost. I was really, really, really lost. that same year, I went on a meditation retreat with a meditation teacher I follow called Adyashanti. And he's a Zen teacher. And it was a 5-day sit, a 5-day silent meditation sit. But he does these talks each day, right? And he was talking about redemptive love, and that so much of the spiritual journey is enlightenment, moving up and out, right? Disidentifying, this is not my body, this is not my bank account, this is not my experience, right? Moving up and out of your identity and your experience. But then there is this other journey, which is a down and in journey, right? An embodiment experience. And I recognize that so much of what I feel called to do is that down and in, bringing heaven into earth, bringing that enlightenment into our everyday experience, into our bones and the flesh and the guts of humanity. And that part of what he was really called to teach was about redemptive love. And it is this grace, this love that touches the parts of us that sometimes have such a hard time struggling with the parts of ourselves we don't like, that we can't seem to reconcile and don't know how to make peace with. And this redemptive love basically says there's no amount of work you can do to earn this love, and there's no amount of lack of work that would prevent it. All I ask is for an invitation. And I'll never forget being in my chair and making that silent invitation and allowing that grace to flow into my life and into my body and touch the parts of myself I was still wrestling with. The parts of myself that said I really didn't belong. And as a result, over time, I just was able to drop into a deeper place of knowing that I do belong, that this, like, how could I not belong? This is my life, my body. And not only do I belong to myself, but I belong to this world. And that my calling was really about bringing people home to themselves in that way. So I wanted to share that story as a bit of a context for why story? Why do I want to help you with story? Why are we doing this today? And there's lots of places you can go for the how-to of story, right? What's the 5-step critical things you need in every story? But the truth is, I find that most of us actually know how to tell story pretty innately. In fact, it's how humans have connected and bonded since the dawning of time. If you just think about it, when you're at a dinner party or out for lunch with somebody, what do? You share stories. So we know how to tell stories. That's not the difficult thing. I think the difficult thing sometimes is understanding why we're telling a story, which stories to tell, when to tell those stories. And at a deeper level even than that, how to tell them in a way that reveals more about ourselves as an invitation for our clients and our tribe to reveal more of themselves to them. Now, it may not even always sound like that, right? The language often won't sound like that. But I wanted to start this by peeling back the why of this for me. From there, dive into working on story. So we're going to answer some questions today. I'm going to hot seat some people. I do have a opportunity for us to dive much deeper into story together. I'll share that with you a little bit later. But that to me is the context as we dive in. Now, we did a few Facebook trainings, and one was on where to find the story. And I want to just revisit that for a little bit, and then we're going to hot seat some people. By the way, throughout this training, if you have comments, feel free to put them in the chat. If you have questions you want me to answer, put them in the question box. In a bit, when I ask if anybody wants to be in the hot seat where I can work with you on your story, you'll press the raise hand button. and we'll be able to queue you up that way. For those of you that have done any work with me around tribal marketing, you know that everything I look at is around pattern and how our wounding has been the perfect training program for our life's work. Our life's challenges prepare us for our life's contribution. And that when we are working with our tribe, how we identify which tribe we're meant to work with and what to offer them starts by identifying the pattern of your wounding that gave you a PhD from life in that pattern from which you can serve your audience. Now, in tribal marketing, what we do is we first identify that pattern, and then we look at how that pattern manifests as symptoms in health, wealth, or relationship. And then we find the problems that your tribe is aware of, has pain around, and is willing to spend money to solve. So that's how we apply pattern in marketing in a very short little snippet. When it comes to story, I believe that understanding this fundamental pattern is the root of understanding which stories to tell, why and when to tell them, and how to tell them in a way that reveals more about who you are and invites your tribe to join you. So as we get into the hot seat here in just a bit, I'm going to be doing a little work with you about understanding that pattern. Then I'm going to ask you about some of your life's challenges, some of your wounding experiences that might not seem remotely relevant to your audience today. Right? Some of you have heard, I used to never talk about being gay from stage because it just didn't seem relevant. It's like, yeah, it's part of my private life, but not really relevant in business. Until I started to see that my tribe is a tribe full of people that need to come out, right? We all need to come out about our real work in this world and the story we're meant to share with our tribe that has them see us as the tribal authority they've been waiting for. And that so much of the challenge I see for this tribe is being riddled with doubt about, am I the one? Do they want me? Will they accept me? Right? Do I have the authority to step out and claim that I am a leader for this tribe? And so that's where we're going to start. We're going to look at pattern first. Then we're going to look at some of the stories in your life that relate to that pattern. Then we're going to look at the tribe's hunger and relate the story to the tribe and their hunger. In today's training, I'm going to be doing some interviewing with you when you're in the hot seat, and then I'll retell the story. When I work with people more intensively with story, I'm going to have you retell the story. For the sake of time today, I'm going to be the one doing some more of the retelling of the story and repackaging the story in a way that can be relevant to the tribe. Now, for the few of you that get into the hot seat today, you have an advantage and a disadvantage. The disadvantage is oftentimes like you get tunnel vision when you're in the hot seat and you can barely like stay present. So just so you know, we will be sending out a recording. And if you're like, wait, what did he say? How did I say that again? You can revisit the recording. For those of you that aren't in the hot seat today, you are the ones that actually get the most benefit because you get to watch and see the structure that we're going through as we do this together. So I'm going to do a few of those, then we'll just take some questions. I'll talk about some deeper storytelling training, and we'll go from there. So let's see, how do we do this? I'm just going to read a few of these as we come in. You asked us to come with a question. I imagine there's a turn to, that for the turn to work well, it must be set up well. So I will be talking about the turn, which is when we move from the personal, which is your story, to the universal, which is how it applies to the tribe. Yeah, there is a setup for it, but actually far less setup than you might imagine. Something about heaven and earth. Make the world a better place. All right, cool, good. All right, good. So let's dive in. What I'd like is if you have a, here's what I'm looking for the sake of today's training. if you want to queue up and have me work with you, what I'm looking for are people that have a sense of what the pattern of your wounding is already, because that's going to shortcut the first part of this, that has a sense of what the pattern of your wounding, like this is about belonging, this is about being an outcast, this is about being unseen and not heard, or a visibility issue, this is about betrayal, this is about whatever it is, right? So that's the pattern, and maybe has a sense of some of the stories that might relate to that. And so that's the first and second thing. And then lastly, the third thing is, you know enough about who your tribe is and what you do for them that we could apply it to your business, right? We aren't trying in this call to try to figure out what your business is. So you need to understand what your business is already. So if you have a sense of your wound pattern, you have some stories that you think might apply, and you understand what your business is, and you're willing to share yourself and have me work with you right here, right now, click the raise hand button, and we'll be able to work with you a few right now. I'm gonna just change the angle of this camera a bit. Awesome, good. All of the above, hand is raised. All right, Jan, you said you have those things, but you don't know how it relates. Jan, if you're willing to press the raise hand button, I want to start with you, actually. There we go. And allowed to talk. Yes. Very good.
Hello.
And Jan, is that you or is that Jan?
Yes, it's Jan. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Great.
Let's see. I don't know why I can't get your video on here.
Oh, because my video is off, and I know my somebody else in the house is doing a big download, so our
Tell you what,
connection would be sketchy.
If you're willing, turn the video on for now, and if the connection's sketchy, I'll have you turn it back off.
Actually, I cannot
at
the moment.
No worries.
I'm not dressed for camera.
No worries, no worries. This is our virtual world here. So I tell you what, for anybody else that queues up, so long as you're not going to flash us, you're good. You can be in your kimono, no worries. So let's start here, Jan. By the way, where are you located?
I'm in New Jersey.
New Jersey, awesome. Are you the one that would rather be in France?
I would rather be in Greece. Yeah.
Greece, that's right. Beautiful. So tell me a little bit about what you know about the pattern of your wounding.
Okay. What I've come to understand is that I definitely have like an issue with visibility.
Yeah.
And one of the things I realized is that as I was growing up, my parents would say things like, that you want to be outstanding, but you don't want to stand out. So it's like you want to do well, but you don't want to draw attention to yourself and
don't blow that horn,
like,
Jan.
Arrogant. Yeah, exactly. So they're from the South, and they're more humble and that sort of thing.
Anybody else relate to that one? Oh, we don't toot our own horn, right? Or tall poppies are the first ones that get cut down. Anybody else? Right? I'm seeing a bunch of yeses here. Absolutely, absolutely agree. Yep. By the way, after we're done, let me tell a little story about authority and entitlement. So we'll dive into that a bit. All right, good. So visibility. So challenging when it comes to marketing to not toot horns.
Just a little, especially when I feel like I really want to do something big. Like I'm getting all these downloads now about doing these big things. And so I obviously have an internal conflict.
Anybody else have that one going along with the visibility issue? I'm supposed to do big things. I have a story for this world. And I have a big conflict. All right, good. So you are not alone. I think visibility is one of the big challenges for messengers in general.
Yeah.
But especially those of us, one of the guys I work with is a guy named Bo Eason. And, Bo always says, I'm looking for the reluctant leader because that's the one I trust most. Right? The one
that'd be me.
I don't really want to, but I see the need.
Yeah.
And because those of us that are frankly more reluctant leaders, there is the challenge we have to work through in order to step up and step out.
Yeah.
But when we do so, we do it, because it's not about us. It's not like,
Hmm.
hey, look at me, right? I wanna razzle dazzle you.
Yeah.
It's because we see the need.
Yeah.
Um, Dragged kicking and screaming, someone says, yes. Um, so I've often identified myself as a reluctant leader. There's a story that I'll be sharing after I work with a few of you. I'll share one of my stories in a bit, and it's a story I so don't want to tell,
Mm.
and it's the story I was told I must tell on today's training. So
Oh.
I am in the same boat with you right now as we speak. And look, and here we are.
Yep.
So tell me about your work. What do you do? Who do you work with?
So
And or
I
what's that calling about that bigger thing?
on that, the download is not complete yet.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what's coming. It has to do with like reaching more people and probably speaking on stage and like
Yep. Yep.
being more, just being a lot more public.
Yeah. And what would you
Um,
have to be public about? What's the message?
uh, the message, it has something to do with, I was the one that was commenting on your comment on heaven on earth. Um, I the message feels like it's something around being being in an ecstatic place and really like living your life through something about through the physical form. Like so creating heaven on earth here through the physical form.
Okay.
Um, but
All right.
I still don't
Yep.
know what it is. It's still
Yep.
coming.
So
Yep.
still fairly fuzzy. All right.
Yes,
And tell me
very.
about what you do know about your work today.
So, what I know about my work today, who I work with, if that helps,
Yep.
is I work with like ambitious uh, amateur triathletes. So they're usually hedge funders or tech, industry types. Very competitive,
Mm-hmm.
usually introverted. Like they really, a lot of them were like Division One or like national team runners
Yep.
or swimmers
Yep.
in school. And
Yep.
then, when they start working, they sort of fall out of sports because there's, often no organized teams
Right.
where they're working and they're very, very like work oriented. And then somewhere down the line, they start to realize that part of their identity is as an athlete and they miss it. And so I get them when they are coming, like they've come back into the sport, they're training really hard, they're not performing at the level that they know that they're capable of, and they're starting to get frustrated or confused, or they've gotten injured because they're training too much. And or they're thinking about quitting because they're like, I clearly don't know what I'm doing, and I suck at this. And I thought I was going to be really great at it. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, so I'm often like the last hope.
Yep.
Um,
All
yeah.
right. Got it.
Hmm.
Cool. Um, and so on the surface, obviously what you do is you help get them like up to snuff and performing
Yeah.
better, right?
Hmm.
So that's the what. Tell me about the how. What's the underlying thing that needs to be addressed for this audience for them to move into that place? Because anybody that's done any elite performance, whether it's
Yep.
being a musician or an athlete or anything else, knows that it's mainly mindset, first and foremost, right?
Yes. Yes, except they don't know that. They usually are very intellectual and very physical. And
Yep.
so they think either they need to know more or they need to train more. And so that's part of where the issue comes in.
Right.
And I
Yep.
usually can't um, address like the mindset or the spiritual component directly.
Yep.
It comes in from the side, like it's very indirect.
Got it. And then last question on this line of questions. What is the underlying spiritual or mindset component that you have to address once they start working with you?
Oy, it depends. depends from person to person, but there's a component of I don't know how to describe it. I guess sort of like groundedness that needs to come in so that they understand it's really more about like it's more of a personal journey. It's more about who they're being as they go on this journey
And
instead
who
of
do they
trying to
have to
drive.
be? Because this is a classic case of what got me here won't get me there, right? So their drive has built their career, but there's
Right.
something about their drive that's actually thwarting their ability to have success as a triathlete.
Right. Yes.
What is it about the drive that is preventing the success as an athlete?
Oh.
You know this. Just take a breath. Like for real, take a breath. What is it about the drive that actually shoots them in the foot when it comes to being a triathlete?
That external it's not an external endeavor. It's an internal journey. And so it's more about the process. So I feel like a lot of the time they get caught up in the result and what's happening externally. And when they slow down and get tuned in to what they really want internally, then they just show up in a different way. They start to.
All right, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Are they used to performing for someone else's expectations, starting as, as a kid with
Yes.
then teachers, then bosses?
Yes. Everything's
All right.
external.
That's the crux of this story. Performing for other people's expectations. And that when you're performing for other people's expectations, there's a reason, and we'll find the reason eventually, why that's preventing more success. And for all of our audiences, one of the things I want everyone to hear is that our audiences have hunger the moment they reach the end of their rope. And what I'm always looking for is hungry people, because they're the people who are most willing to actually do the work and get the results. And they're the people that are most willing to pay top dollar for it.
Right.
Jan, these people aren't going to hire you until they've tried the know more and the train more routes. They've got to do that first, right? And go like, crap, it didn't yield the result I'm looking for. Now what? Right. That's when they'll have ears to listen to you. So tell me about your life meeting other people's expectations.
I don't think I've done that very often. I did when I was a child. Like when I was young, I used to be like very sort of effusive and ebullient, and I was like really joyful about life, and I had a lot of questions, and I was just really excited about everything. And the message I got eventually, in a lot of ways, was to like calm down, sit down, be quiet. Like I definitely grew up with parents who, really thought that children should be seen and not heard. And so I was too much for that. And
let me ask you this, your best clients, do they have this thing where they've become an engineer, or they've become, more this left brain producer, but have some place in them where there's this hidden joy, this hidden curiosity?
Yep.
Is that true?
Every time. Every time.
All right. Yeah. Good. So now we have the story. Do you guys start to hear how just starting to tease these themes apart will help us learn the pattern? Do you start to hear the patterns we're finding with Jen now? This is about having some innate joyfulness, curiosity, effusive love for life being shut down
Yeah.
and complying with that to meet someone else's expectations,
Yep.
right? And from that place, you work hard and you produce in order to get love.
Yep.
Um,
That's what I
and
learned. Do well in
ultimately,
school so I could get my parents' attention, especially my father.
there we go. So we're going to tell a story about your dad.
Achievement.
I'm going to ask you about that in a minute.
Yep.
And by the way, the stories that are going to be most effective are almost always the last stories you want to tell. Just so you know, right? And I'm actually not interested so much about whether or not you want to tell them. What
Yep.
I'm interested in is how effective they are in
Mm.
use to gather your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So this is about working to get to achieve, to get that love and attention and so forth.
Yep. Yep.
But here's what's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It is that natural exuberance that is, when I was a kid, I used to play this video game called Pole Position, and it was this like
Yep.
driver,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And like I loved that game. And there were these like little pellets along the racetrack, like
Yep.
nitrogen pellets, and if you drove over them, you got a nitro, right? And you could press this button, your car would go woo, right, and go like super fast for a little bit, and you could speed ahead of all the other cars. And that's what natural joy and exuberance does, right?
Mm.
It gives them that nitro speed to go far beyond everybody else who's trying to push and achieve, right? It's the internal drive to express, and it expresses as speed as a runner, a swimmer, and a biker.
Mm.
Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what you do. Does that help clarify what you do, by the way?
Yes.
All right,
Yes. Yes.
great.
Yes.
So now tell me about a story of achieving to get dad's love.
um, a specific story or
Yep.
more like the overview?
Nope, not the overview. Here's the thing with story.
Mm-hmm.
Stories are never interesting when they're general,
Yep.
right? Uh, because it's not a story. You're telling your about something, you are inside of the story when it's general. So never, never, never is story very useful when it's like, yeah, I grew up with this kind of dad. Like, okay, great, right?
Right.
No, it's much better. Here's the deal with storytelling, and this is whether we use it from stage, in email copy, on a Facebook ad, wherever we use the story, it needs to paint a picture.
Mm.
Because only when it paints a picture can we live inside of that story with you,
Mm.
right? If you think about a great book, they might talk, they use all the senses, those writers. They talk about the smell, they talk about how something feels when you touch it, they talk about, right, all the senses, and the visuals to paint a picture of the world so that we can inhabit that world with you. So yes, please tell me a specific story, one of the most challenging stories when your soul got crushed in search for dad's love.
Um, so one time when I was in fourth grade, I think, um, my dad wanted to send Christmas cards. And I used to have really good, we had started writing cursive in like third grade. And we used to do this thing at my school where we would like hold up people's writing and the class would judge it. And I got judged on having like the best writing. And I had also taken calligraphy that year. So um, my dad asked me if I could do calligraphy, like on the cards, like in the cards, sign them and, do the envelopes and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, I don't know why I didn't think to ask, but I didn't. And for some reason, I thought that when you're adjusting envelopes, that the woman goes first because you know, ladies first, whatever. And so when when I wrote the envelopes and when I signed everything, I put Mrs. and Mr., not realizing it's supposed to be Mr. and Mrs. And so I did all these cards. I probably did, I don't know, like 50 cards with my calligraphy set. Like I got out my pens and I was all excited and like, you know, I practiced the lettering and did everything. And, you know, I was all excited about it. And I took them down to my father and he took a look at them, took a look at the first one actually. And then he looked at the second one. And then he like looked at me like I was the stupidest person on the planet, got up, took them to the trash, dumped them in, and then just basically gave me a dirty look and walked away and didn't say anything. And then he didn't talk to me for like a week. And I had no idea what happened. And my mom had to tell me. And I was like, I don't, like, what did I do? I don't know what happened. And I was like crying and yeah, so.
Got it. And how did that affect your performance in school?
Well, that was probably the first point when I realized, like, I used to just enjoy school and I would go there and like be myself and tell stories and like have fun. And that was probably the first point when I realized that I need to like basically buckle down and do things perfectly or else it didn't count. And so I started to be more focused in school, which worked for a few years and then eventually it didn't. But yeah, no, I was like at the top of my class after that.
All right,
for years, for several years, because that's the only way I got his attention.
Yeah. And last question, when did being at the top of your class crash and burn? When did that perfectionism bite you in the butt?
You know, around 8th grade, like the second half of 8th grade, I just started to become less and less interested in school. And I actually, even though I was still at the top of my class, like at a certain point, I just disengaged and I would like hide in the bathroom during certain classes because I just didn't want to engage with the teachers because they had started like asking me questions and they were asking me questions in front of the whole class and the whole class is like looking at me like, what are you doing and what's going on? And like you're fucking up. And, you know, at that point in my area, like they really start talking about high school and focusing on like, now you need to, you know, start choosing things because then that affects how you're going to college and like you're messing up your potential for like high school and college. So I was like, fuck it.
Yep. So, so I'm gonna give this story a whirl here a minute.
Yep.
And let me just see if there's anything else I want to know. I don't think so. Before I do it, I want to share with everybody, I want to paint a picture of what I'm going to do in just a moment. So you can follow along and see the process I'm walking through as I retell this story of Jan's. So it always starts with a personal and specific, and then we move to the universal where it becomes valuable to them, right? And we must make that turn from personal to universal. Otherwise, it's just gratuitous. It's like, hey, let me talk about me, right? So we need to make that turn. So you'll see me start with this story, the calligraphy story. And we all have a million calligraphy stories, each one of us. We have a bunch of those. So I love it. We can just reach right in and grab one. There's this wealth of stories just waiting to be used. And then as I make this turn from personal to universal, I'm ensuring that I speak to the underlying point of the story as it relates to them and their challenge today. So I'm just going to give this a whirl, right? If we were to workshop this, we could obviously hone it and shape it and whatnot, but just to give a picture, and I kind of like that we're not workshopping it and honing it, because I want to show you all, once you understand the process of doing this, how you don't need to make it perfect, right? I'm not looking for the perfect words. When you're out to dinner with people, when you're at a cocktail party with people, you aren't looking for the perfect words. You're just sharing a story. We're just doing it in a way that's a bit more targeted in terms of connecting with this tribe around our offer, right?
Yep.
So I would say something like this. By the way, were you daddy's little girl?
Oh yeah.
All right.
I'm the only daughter and I'm the baby.
Awesome. So I grew up as daddy's little girl. I was the only daughter. I was the baby of the family. And I just looked up to my dad so much. I always wanted his love, his attention. And I worked really hard to get it. Whatever I could do to make my dad smile, that's what I would do. Well, in fourth grade, that's when we really started concentrating on cursive, right? And we used to have this thing we would do in our class where we would hold up our writing and show it to people, and we would judge one another and see who had the best writing in class. And that was me. I was able to do cursive. I even started to learn calligraphy and had those special calligraphy pencils and pens. Later that year, when Christmas rolled around, my dad wanted my help in labeling all the Christmas cards that year. I was really excited because I got to work with my dad and use this special skill that I had built to help share this message with all our friends and family. And I practiced how to do each one. I was very precise before I ever got those labels out. And eventually I got the envelopes out and I did 50 different envelopes, addressing each and every one in the most perfect handwriting. I was so happy. After I had all these 50 done, I brought it to my dad to say, hey, I did it. Here it is, Dad. And I'll never forget, he took the first one and looked at it. Then he took another one and looked at it. And then he took all 50, walked over to the trash can, dropped them right in the bin. He walked out of the room and he didn't really even talk to me the rest of that week. I didn't know what I had done wrong. In fact, it took my mother telling me, yeah, you labeled Mrs. and Mr. so-and-so versus Mr. and Mrs. The Mr. goes first. Well, I didn't know that. And I just thought the Mrs. goes first because ladies go first. And that was a real turning point in my life. It's when, rather than living from a place of joy and exuberance, I started to really work and achieve to get my dad's love and attention. And it's also the turning point when school went from something being fun and enjoyable to something that I buckled down in and tried to do perfectly, or otherwise, as I learned, it wouldn't count. Now, what I know about you as an engineer or a technical person who was maybe a Division I athlete and is a triathlete today, that most likely you've worked really hard to get where you're at professionally and in the rest of your life. In fact, when it comes to sports and being a triathlete, after having that identity at one point earlier in your life and wanting to reestablish yourself as an athlete today, that you've applied those same principles, right? No more, train more. No more, train more. The problem is, it's not getting you any further. And I know how frustrating and confusing that can be. And on some days, you just feel like quitting and throwing in the towel. But you can't, because this is something that ultimately is here to bring you joy. Now, what I know is that knowing more and training more, trying to be perfect and get it right, is actually the very thing that's preventing you from having the scores and the speed that you actually want. When we work together, I do look at your form, and I do look at everything that goes into the physicality of being a top level grade A triathlete. But more than that, I help you bring back this innate joy, because when you do, that's the thing that gets you off the starting block, unlike anyone else. So there is an example, right? Sign me up, right? Now, it's one, I love that, Diane. Yeah, who else is like, man, if I were one of those people, I'm in, I want this. Like, where do I learn more? Please let me have a consult, right? If that's you, just type in yes. So Dorian, yes. Joe, yes. I don't even feel like running, and I'm thinking yes. That's awesome. Good. So I want to just paint a picture of what I did there. Right? I spent some time and I painted a picture of you as this little girl and built the picture of you and the relationship with dad. We could see it. We could see the, the gleam in your eyes. And then we told the turning point story, which is about the calligraphy and the Christmas cards. And the result of that story of doing things perfectly or it wouldn't count. And then to make the turn, and those, Dexter, you asked about setting up the turn. I don't really set it up. Notice I kind of finished that story, and then I went right into telling the audience who they are, right? As engineers, technical people who've maybe been Division I athletes and are triathletes today. I tell them who they are, and then I tell them the problem they're running into, and bring the lesson from my story into what they need today. And that's how we make the personal universal. Make sense? Good. That's what we need to do. Now, that was a little longer version because it's my first time, but there's a way to tell that in a 2-minute version, in a 30-second version. There's a way to do it in a written way. There's a way to do it from stage. Right? And it's this kind of story that I would invite you to be telling every time you step out into the world to market. It's one thing to say, oh, I help triathletes who are former Division I athletes in technical roles have more success when knowing more and training more just isn't working, right? Like, okay, that's interesting. But man, when we tell this story, we really get that you understand. Right? We have no more doubt. And in a world filled with more marketing messages than ever before in the history of humanity, we need to be able to cut through and build rapport and trust more quickly than ever before. And I believe story is the #1 way to do it. So, good?
Yes, that was brilliant. Thank you.
You got it. Thank you, Jan. I appreciate it. Let's give a round of applause. I wish we had applause buttons, but thank you. I appreciate it. All right, good. So let's see. How do I do this? There's Jan. All right, good. Applause, applause, applause. So I want to hot seat one more person, and I'm going to do that in just a minute, but I want to share something before we do that. I told you about a story I knew I was supposed to tell in today's training. I'm going to share that with you now. Let's see, how do I change role to attendee? There we go. Me please, me next. And I also want to share a little bit about how we can dive into story together after today. So I'll share a bit about that in a minute. I told you earlier that as I've worked with my guidance around what my calling is at this point in history, at this point in my life, the thing that I've heard over and over again is, Jeffrey, you're here to help people tell humanity's new story, right? And then that's why I've been in the world of broadcasting my whole life, broadcasting messages, sharing stories my whole life. But they also said that it's really about power. And what I know is that for so many of us, we need power to do good in the world, right? To have influence and reach and scale. So we need power to do good, but on some level, power is bad. And so we shy away from it and we hesitate and we say, I'm not sure I'm the one. I'm not sure anybody wants this from me. I'm not sure anybody's going to believe this. Anybody in that boat, right? Where the doubt just is this lingering thing in the back of your mind, especially when it comes to the work you really feel called to do. Yes, 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 big time, yes, yes, yes. Oh yeah, raised hand. Right. And not just power, but my native power. All right, good, absolutely. So when I was a little kid, my mom was crazy. We used to have this song we would sing in the car called My Old Jalopy. And at the end of the song, it says, honk, diddly, honk, honk, beep, beep. And we had this old Volkswagen, and we would all dive to be the one honking the horn, no matter where we were in the car. She was crazy in other ways too, though. She would fly off the handle in these fits of rage. I think now we would say there was hormonal imbalance. And she would chase after us, sometimes with pots and pans in her hands. I remember as a little kid hiding behind the sofa or locking myself in my room, just trying to get away from it in any way I could. When I was 8 years old, something shifted. See, my mom, while she would go into these fits of rage, there was this unwritten rule that she wouldn't touch us, right? She never hit us. But when I was 8, we were in this fight, and we were in her bathroom. And I remember she was in front of me, and I was here. And behind me was this tub. And we were fighting, and I don't know what I said, but she shoved me. And the back of my knees caught on the lip of the tub, and my butt went down, and my head smacked the tile wall behind me. I still remember the thwack of the sound as my head hit that wall. And I'll never forget the look of pain and regret and confusion and sorrow on my mom's face. You know, that what have I done? Look. When I was 13, that same kind of rage had seeped into my life. See, I went to a new private school, a new parochial school, and I was a punk rocker. I wore all black. I had my half my head shaved, wore my Doc Martens, and these kids didn't know what to do with me. My nickname became Fairy. Hey, Fairy, what's up? The summer before I entered that school was also the summer I realized I was gay. So when they would call me these names, they hurt. You know, I didn't know if they actually knew my secret or if it was just a random slam, but it hurt. The other thing that happened that summer is that I grew a foot. I was 6'2" by the time I was 13. And so these kids would never say this name directly to my face. They would be 30 feet off. Hey, Fairy. And I would never give them the justification of chasing them, but I would always remember. And I don't care if it was the next day, 3 days later, or the next week. When you passed me in the hallway, talking to somebody else, least expecting it, smack, you got it in the gut. I got 47 detentions that year. So I know a bit about what it's like to be at the affect of the abuse of power. And I know a bit about what it's like to be the one abusing power. And as a leader called to tell humanity's new story, what I know is that we need power to share these messages and spread our message. And that we need to reconcile the old stories we have about what we think power is. And I also know that only as we start to understand and own our stories, can we actually own our authority. Because it's in owning our stories that we can reconcile some of these old misconceptions of power and actually utilize the gifts of these stories in service to our tribe and tell them in a way that has more and more people gravitate towards us, building our tribe and having our tribe move forward into this world together. And so if there's anything I want for you today, it's to step into that place of authority and realize that whatever you thought was power was never really power all along. See, my friends, that's what this is about. This is about stepping into our power, into our authority, and using story to do so. Using story to both own our own history, but also share our humanity with people and take the thing we least expected had any power in it at all, right? The story we last want to share, and use it to build trust and relationship and rapport so that we can gather together and build a new world. So that's why I felt compelled to do story. And I want to take a few minutes and share something with you. Marion, thank you. And that is that I want to work with you. I want to work with you around helping you understand your story, which stories you have, which stories to tell, when to tell them, why to tell them, how to tell them, so that you can stop marketing and start ministering to your people. And so we're going to do a deeper dive on this together. And there's a program I've developed called Tribal Story Marketing. And it really is going into the ins and outs of not just the formula for telling story, but understanding these patterns that are the universal patterns that connect you and your tribe together, that bond you together and have them know, like, and trust you more quickly than anything else you could use in marketing. There are 4 quintessential pillars I've seen to decoding what the pattern is and bringing that into story. And so I want to share just a little bit about what I've included in this program and invite you into it. I will also tell you in just a minute, it's priced at a level unlike I normally price things, because I think storytelling is the number one thing we all need. And it's something I want in all of our hands. So this program has 4 primary modules to it. I'll go through those in just a minute. There's 2 90-minute live story coaching sessions with me. There is a number of bonuses I added because I thought you would be have benefit from working with some of the people that I love and trust around story. And it includes a couple tickets to my event this fall so that we can come together and share this story more deeply. So I'm going to walk through it. If you want to walk through it with me, you can go to tribalstorymarketing.com, tribalstorymarketing.com, and I'll share just a little bit about what's in it. And then I'll take some questions and we'll hot seat one more person. In fact, let me get my handy dandy paper out here and I'll write the URL up here for y'all. Dub. By the way, I did not win the calligraphy contest. Tribal Story Marketing.com. So the first module is about tribal bonding and story bonding and how to understand what that underlying pattern is that bonds you and your tribe together. That's really the foundation of everything I do, including story. The second module is called Hidden in Plain Sight. And this is finding those tribal attraction stories like we just did with Jan. And to tap into this wealth of stories that you already have in you, that we just need to mine out. So you start to see like, oh, I have all sorts of stories. And for those of you who ever thought like, I need a big heroic story or something super dramatic, in order to tell stories. I used to think that too, but if Jan's story is any example, like I love that we did that story with Jan, because it's a story about calligraphy and Christmas cards, right? So they don't have to be big dramatic stories. In fact, I don't think they necessarily should be. The more simple and personal and universal they are, sometimes the more effective they are, because more people can relate to it. So that's the second module. Module 3 is about activating your inner hero's journey or heroine's journey. Here's what I love. Your tribe goes on this hero's journey. And at each stage in that hero's journey, there's something else they need and something else they're looking for from you. And so we'll map that hero's journey. You'll start to see which stories are most needed at which stage in their hero's journey. And I'll teach you how to match the story to the offer, right? So at each stage in the hero's journey, there might be a different offer you're making to your tribe and different stories to tell to have them know that you understand them and have something for them. So that's the third module. And lastly is how to make the personal and vulnerable universal and valuable. I think you've seen a bit of that today. And this to me is really where we go into this combination of transcendence or transformation with this deeply personal and human way that we connect with people. And the thing I love about that fourth module is when you really understand how to do this, you can let go of the marketing speak that you probably hate, and I do too, and without letting go of being effective, right? So oftentimes we try to stop doing marketing because it feels like crap, right? And really, when we're talking about that kind of marketing, we're talking about manipulation more than we are marketing. And instead, we try to go into being kind and loving and whatnot, but that doesn't work unless there is a sharp sword of truth filled with compassion. And that is found in your story. So that's in module 4. As I said, there's a few other bonuses. There's 2 90-minute story coaching calls with me. So each one of those 4 modules, I'm going to teach live. There's Q&A after them. And then just to be sure we have more time to roll up our sleeves together, there's 2 90-minute story coaching calls. Then I've invited my copywriter, Kylie Slavic, to do a few bonuses with us. Because I know for a lot of us, we need to learn how to use story in copy. Kylie's one of the most sought after copywriters in the market today. She's generated over $5 million in a business using story primarily in her copy. She's worked with numerologist.com, HeartMath, Hay House, etc. So that's the first one. Then she's going to do a training on pitching your story to podcast media. So if you feel called to speak more, one of the ways you connect with stages and podcasts and media is by sharing a shortened, condensed version of your story that people go, ooh, wow, that's interesting. We want that. So that bonus is on that. And then lastly, I've invited my friend Kelly Swanson to join us. Now, Kelly is this exuberant, super funny Southern woman. She's one of the top keynote speakers around. She keynoted the International Toastmasters Convention. She's a Huffington Post contributor. She's right now on a TV show on Amazon Prime. And she has such heart and soul and is really funny. So we're going to do a training on infusing humor into story, especially if your story isn't funny. So those are the bonuses. I'm also including 2 tickets to my event this fall called To Lead. So that's a time after we go through this training together to come together in person and roll up our sleeves together. That training this fall is a 3-day deep dive, and it really is going to be about telling humanity's new story. So we're going to take this much further there. There's a private Facebook group. You get forever access to the content. So that's all at tribalstorymarketing.com. You can go there. All the details are there. The price for the program is just $497. So that's a price point I don't do a whole lot at, but I really wanted to make this accessible to everybody because I don't care if you're a total newbie or really seasoned in business, everyone can use this particular training. So $4.97, it should be a very easy investment. The call to lead tickets alone are $9.97 each. So I try to make this as great a value as possible to make it accessible to as many people as possible. So I just want you to imagine being able to use story like we did with Jan, and use story in your marketing copy, use it on enrollment calls, use it in conversations, in networking events, and at cocktail parties, using it to pitch yourself to people who book speakers. That's what we're going to help you do in this training. So go to travelstorymarketing.com, check it out. I hope you can join us. And I'm going to take this last 15 minutes here to take some questions and see if I can work with one other person. Okay. Oh, there are a few questions coming in here. Is this pre-recorded content done on our own schedules? So I will be teaching the modules live, and there will be an online learning area where all the trainings are housed. So you can join us live, or you can join us via the recording in the online learning area. Either one is up to you. When does it start? How long does the course go? That should all be on the page. It's going to start later on in June. It goes through July. There's a total of 4 trainings from me, plus 2 story coaching calls with me, plus 3 other bonuses. So that's 6, 7, 8, 9 trainings in total. And they're going to happen every week. If you have questions, roughly when will your live event be? It's going to be in November in Los Angeles. So it's in Marina Del Rey in Los Angeles, California, November 8 to 10. So does this include one-on-one coaching? At $497, I can't do one-on-one coaching for everyone. So there is group coaching in the program. Depending on your need or interest, we may offer some deeper dive one-on-one. That's that. Days of the week. Let's see, I believe it's going to be on Tuesdays, but you can always email support. Let's see, support@jeffreyvandyke.com, and all the information is there. So if you have other questions, and I think it's at 9:30 a.m. Pacific. So those are going to be hour-long trainings followed by roughly half-hour Q&As. So that's when we're doing that. Okay, good. A few other questions here. When not to share stories. Okay, yeah, Jen asked, is there a time when not to tell stories? Yeah, my friend Marcia Weeder used to say, never tell a story while you're still bleeding from it. Never tell a story while you're still bleeding from it. So if there are stories you have that you really haven't done your own integration around, yep, those are stories you don't want to tell yet, right? The story I told about that one time my mom pushed me, I've never told that story before. That's a brand new story for me. And I was told to tell it, but I also have done a lot of work. My parents are awesome, and we have beautiful relationships now, right? So I've done a lot of healing and growth, integration with them, so I can tell that story. The main thing is, are you telling a story in service to your tribe, or are you telling a story to do your own healing? If it's for your own healing, that should be done with a therapist. If it's in service to your tribe, it should be done on stage. Okay, I think those are the majority of the questions. So anything else, just go to travelstorymarketing.com. You can shoot an email to us at support@jeffreyvandyke.com if there's any questions not on that page that you want answered. And maybe in some of the follow-up emails we send, we can also answer some of those questions. So let's see if there's one more person I can queue up. Let's see. Maria, I'm so looking forward to this class. Awesome. Thank you. I look forward to having you. Let's see here. Just tuning into who I'm supposed to queue up. Okay. Shenya, are you there?
I'm here. Yes, Shana.
Shana. Shenya, look at me and my dyslexia. So we're going to do this one a little bit more quickly. Oh, one other question somebody typed in. I hate being publicly vulnerable. What about that? I just need to answer that a second because I think that's perhaps one of the most important questions. I believe that it's something we all must learn to do if we're meant to lead. And some of what we'll be looking at is where the fear of being publicly vulnerable is coming from, so that you know where you might have to do a little bit more personal work. That said, I find that there are certain stories that we're able to tell right now, and certain ones you might have to do a little work on before you're able to tell them publicly. So I'm not going to ask anyone to tell a story that you're not ready to tell. Okay. So Shana, where are you located?
St. Paul, Minnesota.
St. Paul, don't you know, hey? Uh-huh. I went to St. Olaf College, don't you know? So I used to live in Minneapolis. That's cool. So tell me a little bit about what you do and who you do it for. What's your work about, Shana?
I'm an author and speaker.
Author and speaker. What do you speak on and to whom?
I write fiction, nonfiction, and poetry about seeking and finding empowerment, joy, and unconditional love. And I write primarily for people who are trauma survivors, who have been through abuse, domestic violence, who also deal with depression, anxiety, chronic pain.
All right. And where do you speak?
I'm sorry?
What types of places do you speak?
When I'm doing book talks, generally.
Uh-huh. All right. So like, is that at like bookshops or is it at like women's conferences? What kind of places are they?
I have before spoken, I've done bookstores, libraries.
All right, good. One other question. Do you offer services or is it primarily your work as a writer and speaker?
Primarily my work as a writer and speaker.
All right, great. And so is there anything you're selling when you talk? Are you selling books? Are you selling courses? Or is it mainly inspiration, hope, etc.?
Combination of books and hope. I have been asked more recently as I'm coming out about my connection to my guides. I've been asked for readings, but right now I'm not offering to do.
You're not offering them yet. All right. Is that something you think you might do?
It terrifies me.
Yeah, I get it.
I don't want to be responsible.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. That's not what I asked. Is that something you imagine you will be doing?
I will probably wind up doing them in some form, yes.
Yeah. So, you know, I said at the beginning of this call, we all need to come out, right? And there's a message for every single one of us to come out about. And it's usually the last thing we want to do. You know, I think our life's calling are first and foremost structured around us stepping into larger and larger versions of ourselves. And if you've ever done any training as an athlete, you know it's at the edge of your comfort zone or at the end of your comfort zone that you actually grow, right? That you grow muscle, that you grow speed, that you grow ability, etc. So for all of us, yeah, this stuff, telling these stories, offering the next level of service, stepping into bigger stages, it is outside of our comfort zone. If it weren't, we would not grow. So absolutely, this is outside of your comfort zone, and I'm glad to hear that it is. Doesn't mean that you don't have some work to do, right? That's just part of the journey. But if we can understand how to tell stories in a way that makes the connection with a tribe more easy and doesn't have you feel like you have to prove anything, would that be helpful?
Yes.
All right, good. Tell me about what you know about your wound pattern.
I know that I have a visibility wound and wounds around safety and worthlessness.
Yeah. All right, good. Safety is a big one. And what, for these listeners of these stories and people that will eventually come and do some form of a reading with you, what are they struggling with? So yeah, they've been trauma survivors, but how is it showing up? Depression, anxiety, chronic pain?
Yes.
All right, got it. And they're clear that they have depression, anxiety, and chronic pain, yes?
Yes.
Like that's known, that's a lot, they know that in their mind. Do they know that there's a connection between their trauma and depression, anxiety, chronic pain?
I would say they at least suspect it.
All right, got it. Good. Tell me a story that relates to visibility, safety, and maybe worthlessness, but at least visibility and safety.
When I was a freshman in high school, I started writing down things that I was hearing my guide say in these notebooks. And I was actually afraid to name them to name the guides because I didn't want to like insult them. So I just named them voice A, voice B, and voice C. And they were saying these wonderful things about how I was loved more than I possibly could understand, and about being much more.
Hold on. Good. Actually, let me have you go on for one more moment. Love more than possibly understand, and being what?
Being more than just the body that I inhabited.
Got it. And do you have religious wounding?
Yes.
Do your people have religious wounding?
Many of them do.
Uh-huh. Does it have anything to do with their sense of worthlessness?
I'm not sure.
All right. I'm going to say I think I have a hunch, probably yes. Tell me a story. So so obviously I'm looking for the conflict, right?
Right. So that one in 9th grade was when my mom found these journals.
Uh-huh. And what happened?
I came home from school one day to discover her with them open in front of her on the table, and she'd clearly been crying. And she started screaming about how I was, what was this? I was like communing with demons, and I was clearly psychologically sick, and I was trying to argue with her. She hit me several times and threw me to the ground, and then took all my journals and burned them in the fireplace.
Mm-hmm.
And then she told me to go to my room, that she couldn't even look at me, and she wished I'd never been born.
Got it. So somebody earlier was asking, like, is there a time when we can't tell stories? And I just want to say to everybody listening, as you hear Shana, you can tell that you've done a lot of work around this story, right? You've done a lot of healing around this, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Otherwise, you would not be able to tell it the way you're telling it right now. So this is an example of something that's really personal and vulnerable, and you've done a sufficient level of work around it to integrate it so that it can be useful to your people. And this is the same kind of story that if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't want to share this one yet. So what's the relationship between your audience's spiritual life or lack thereof and their chronic pain and depression?
There's a lot of doubt and a lack of self-trust, a difficulty trusting themselves, trusting their own connection to source.
And when they do start to trust that connection, what shifts for them?
For the people that I have worked with, things start popping up, things are showing up in their life. They start noticing serendipitous happenings, thoughts start coming lightning fast, and it's like they're starting to see their life.
All right, I got it.
Unfold.
Yep. So really what the arc of this story is, from life has stopped to life starts moving. That's really what this story is about. Because for them, their life is kind of ground to a halt, right? Depression, anxiety, chronic pain, etc. So let me try sharing this one. Then I'll see if there's a few last questions and we'll close for the day. And I'm just going to take a few liberties as I share this. Know that if there's anything I'm saying that doesn't feel right to you, I would want you obviously to say it in a way that does work for you when you share something like this. Yes?
Yes.
All right, cool. Good. Great. So when I was a young girl, I was very perceptive, right? I was very empathetic. I could seem to understand what people were thinking or feeling. And by the time I was a freshman in high school, I started hearing messages. I had these journals and I would write in them. And it felt weird to even name these voices because it felt like spiritual voices. So I just labeled them voice A, B, and C, right? And the most amazing thing was that while I grew up in a really challenging family with a mother that was harsh and would sometimes hit us and scream at us, these voices were giving me a message unlike anything I heard at home. These were messages that were saying these wonderful things about how loved I am, and that I'm more than this experience and more than this body and more than the home I live in or the school I go to. They help me have a sense of worth and value and help me feel safe. And I loved these journals and I loved this communication. One day when I came home from school, I saw my mom. She was sitting at the table and she had these journals open. She had been reading them. And she was crying. When I walked through the door, she started screaming at me about communing with demons and that I was psychologically sick. She took the journals and threw them in the fire. She hit me and threw me to the ground and said that she wished I had never been born. That's when I started questioning if I was making it all up, if I really was loved the way they said I was, and started to question even more my own sense of value. Now, this happened for many, many years, and it kind of ground my life into the ground until I started listening again. And it was actually my spiritual guides that helped me out of my pain, out of my chronic pain, out of my depression, out of the anxiety I walked through the world with every day. And what I know is that as someone who has experienced trauma, right, because you're the people I work with, that so often we have depression and anxiety, and we have chronic pain where that trauma gets lodged into our bodies. And while I think it's a beautiful and wonderful thing to work with therapists and do trauma healing, at some level, that only goes so far. And while for me, it got me out of depression and into kind of a neutral zone, it didn't bring me into a life really worth living. It didn't bring me into joy and happiness. But what has done that is understanding once again that there is something larger than me going on. To reconnect with these voices of encouragement and guidance, where ideas start coming faster than ever before, where opportunities start opening up, where serendipity is my everyday experience. And rather than my life being ground into a halt, my life has taken off. And what I know for you is that if you're ready to step out of your life being ground down further and further and further, and instead you're ready to have your life be lifted up, it's time we reconnect with the deeper truth of who you are, why you're here, and what really is the case about your value in this world. So
that's beautiful.
Now, here's what I want to say. Cindy, you're beginning to get it. I love it. How to tell the story in a way that people can understand how I learned to move from fear to love. Thank you, Jeffrey and Shana. Awesome. Thank you for that comment, Cindy. Yeah, do you see how I'm not puffing this up? This doesn't feel like marketing. It doesn't feel like I'm trying to prove anything to anybody. Instead, I'm connecting more deeply with people by sharing a truth that touches someplace in them that is hungry. And when you can do that, that's when that audience starts to know, like, and trust you. They feel like they can lean into you and get what they need from you. And that's the beginning of building your tribe, building your audience, and having a lot more sales in a way that feels congruent with your soul. That's what I want for you. So Shana, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to work with you.
Thank you very much. That was phenomenal.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. We're a little over our 90 minutes here. So I just want to share a few final words. Let's see, how do I do this? I'm not good at making people not be in a panelist again. All right, well, tell you what, there we go. So here's what I'd like to say. I want to work with you. I want to work with you on your story, and I want to help you understand, most of all, how to structure this in a way that takes this thing that you do, that you are here to do, and has your right tribe go, oh, I get it. Thank you for showing up. Let's go, right? That's ultimately what I want. And I also want for you to step into more of your power and authority. And when you start to see the relationship between your life stories and your life's service, that's when you start to step into that innate authority, right? By really owning your story, you start to own your authority. I've put a lot into this program. This is a very rich program, both with the content I'm teaching, the bonuses, the event this fall. It's a very, very rich program. And I've priced it at just $497 to make it as easy as possible for anybody that wants to roll up your sleeves and start using this material in your work, from stage, in your marketing copy, to connect more deeply with your right tribe. I want you to join me. That's really the bottom line. I want to do this with you. So if you would like to do that with me, go to tribalstorymarketing.com. You can read all the details there. I'm seeing Marion saying I'm in. A lot of other people saying yes, yes, yes. So good. With that, we're going to close for today. I want to thank you for your time, for your attention, for your commitment And most of all, I want to thank you for your willingness to step into this discomfort, because I'm not telling you that telling story is comfortable. It's not. It can get comfortable, but at first it's going to challenge you. It's going to push you. But it is in that edge that you step into your visibility, and in your visibility, step into your leadership. Look, we can do this together. So go to tribalstorymarketing.com, sign up, join us, and until then, I send you all my love. Take care, everybody.